Thanks, Vanessa. I will attempt to make student destinations as interesting as possible. Um, I didn't write this, as my marketing person said expert in student engagement, but I would say over the last 4 or 5 years, I have had a lot of experience in student or learner engagement. So we've worked with further education colleges and training providers and combined authorities doing just that, getting hold of how to reach learners. So we'll go into that in a little bit more detail a bit later on. There's been one focus of the UK government that's changed quite drastically over the last few years, which is moving from just tracking learners into destinations to tracking them into outcomes. One of our training provider clients, Netcom Training up in Manchester, they won a big contract with the GMCA in Manchester. And they said what a lot of training providers have said to us, they have an AEB contract and a skills bootcamp contract. They said, David, about a year ago, it wasn't like this. We usually got most of our funding when we got learners to the end of a course. And now we're having to support them into outcomes. And it's worth a lot of money to them. Not in the least that it's actually just quite an important thing to do. So that's a big change. And that's what we're helping clients do. I'm just going to reduce this as I can't see my notes. Yeah, and we've got over 75 clients, got nearly 100 clients now, actually. They are training providers, combined authorities, FE colleges, a few in your area, East Sussex, Plumpton, realised I've done a bit of work down there as well. So that is us. Just a quick overview in terms of what the actual company does. We're an EdTech software company, and we have created a technology product, which is a digital assistant behind WhatsApp and SMS, which engages learners a lot more effectively in most situations compared to what is used normally, which is email and phone. And we give our clients data to inform better strategies around 3 core areas. So one is increasing the conversion rate of inquiries to enrollments for learners, which is a revenue generator. One is around tracking destinations and completely removing any manual work in that area and giving you better quality of data to inform curriculum changes and hopefully win more contracts. And then the third one is a new one, a beta system around improving careers engagement, which is a big Ofsted focus. And that gets over the problem that only a few careers advisors, 1 or 2 careers advisors, can't really engage thousands of learners that effectively, not with all the things that Ofsted want them to do, and Matrix and QCS. So that is us. So today, just going to go through a few things. It'd be good to get people who are actually on the call talking. If they're interested in doing so, we're going to a couple of breakout rooms and just see why people are interested or bothered about coming today, and see if there's anything specific they want to get. There'll just be a minute or 2 each. And then we'll look at why measure outcomes. What is an outcome? Why is it actually important? I've talked about this over the last couple of years at a number of different events, but Generation Alpha, better get ready for Generation Alpha. It is going to be a generation of 2 billion people, biggest generation ever, and it's coming up pretty quickly in a year and a half, 2 years. So how do you market or sell to them? What do they need? And we're going to look a little bit at traditional data collection methods. Like I said before, email and phone, what other alternatives are there, and how do you use them? And then look at best practice from a destinations and outcomes perspective. The government really is bothered about this, and with increased devolution around AB and adult courses, your combined authorities are very bothered about this. And then we'll look at a little bit of how you might leverage data for actually improving your company. Okay, you've got a load of data, but what are you going to do off the back of it? So that's quite an important question. So that's the agenda for today. Learning objectives, a few areas will identify best practices and also key metrics for tracking student destinations and outcomes. Understanding the limitations of traditional data collection methods, and where they work and where they don't. And then look at learning how to leverage student outcomes to inform curriculum design, but also improve the whole student experience. Imagine if you could improve your student destinations and student outcomes, and you can measure them more effectively. If you're getting more people into good jobs that they like and they stay in, then it's likely that if you market that correctly, you'll probably get more learners if you market that right. So those are a few of the learning objectives. I'll talk a little bit about destinations versus outcomes. I guess one of the key things is in terms of destinations, there's really only 4 destinations. If you're leaving school, university, college, training provider, whatever, there's just 4 simple destinations. The way that you track destinations and outcomes can change a little bit. A lot of training providers and colleges sometimes ask for slightly different data for their combined authority, because one's focusing on moving people from level 2 to level 3 or whatever. And there's also definitely a few different definitions of certain types of destinations for HE. The Greater London Authority, for instance, they focus on getting a good job, and there's differing definitions over there. But if you're keeping it super simple, there's really 4 destinations. So a destination in this context, it typically refers to the immediate path or direction that the learners take after completing their educational training program, and it is employed, unemployed, apprenticeship, or a further level of education. So those are the 4 key ones. That's a destination. And how does that change with outcomes? Well, outcomes, again, like a few of the government, some of the government language that they use, the government aren't always consistent with the language they use, which I'm sure that a lot of people would be aware of. And outcomes has been used interchangeably with destinations, but it is different. It's basically a broader focus, and it encompasses the overall results or achievements that learners get as a consequence of that educational experience. So it might not only include the destination itself, but also longer term impacts. So things like increased employability, improved skills, higher earnings, career advancement, social mobility, that kind of thing. So that's really the difference. The destination is a place, the outcome is, the impact that you've had on that person. Quite important when you think about things like apprentices, which have had nearly a 50% dropout the last 5 years, and the government is spending hundreds of millions. They want to know now that actually people are getting good outcomes off the courses you're giving them. So that's difference between the destinations and outcomes. I know there's a couple of people in my group weren't quite sure about that. So it can help show the effectiveness of your delivery, which is quite important. The governments basically want to know whether you're spending their money effectively. So if training providers can show good destinations, then if the whole of the FE sector was getting better and better destinations, there might be more funding that might go into that area. There is quite a lot of money going into skills boot camps at the moment, and they, in the early stages, have been shown to get people jobs quite quickly. Whether they're getting people sustained jobs, which is getting jobs for a long period, or getting outcomes for a longer period, is yet to be seen. And I already mentioned the apprenticeship dropout issue. So I spoke to the Association of Apprentices CEO, Emily Rock, just a couple of weeks ago. They did a big report into why apprentices drop out, and the biggest reason was a lack of employer engagement, which is quite hard. Sometimes you think, why does that happen? But you imagine if you have an apprentice at like a small local supermarket, and you are the owner of that supermarket, and you've got 4 staff and one is an apprentice, you probably don't have lots and lots of time to support them, or to always keep them on board. So it's quite important to think about the reasons behind why people are or aren't getting these destinations. So that's quite important. It informs intent and impact of curriculum. Those words there are very important, quite specific, because that's some of the exact wording from Ofsted inspections. This won't be relevant for university unless you run funded courses like skills boot camps, which quite a lot of universities do, and probably will increasingly do as they need to get more diverse revenue. But if you think about how you're informing intent and impact of curriculum, that's exact wording from the education inspection framework that Ofsted will follow. The key thing about people like training providers and colleges is that they are there usually to fulfill a local need, which universities are to a point, but sometimes more nationally. So if you're trying to fill a local need, there's different courses needed in different areas. So if you look at the strategies of the Greater London Authority versus the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, they're different. There's more focus on things like green skills jobs, creative jobs down in London, and they have a slightly different approach. Thinking about student experience and satisfaction, why does a learner come to your university, training provider, college? They probably half the time want to get a job, and they want to get a career. So does your course help them do that? And can you evidence that? And if you can go back to people who've been on your course and got a good job and had that job sustained, they've been in a long term, and then that would be a really powerful marketing tool. So we measure on our system things like qualitative feedback, what the students are saying about the product, about your course. What are they saying that's good? What are they saying that's bad? And that's probably the thing that's used most by clients, the qualitative feedback of learners, and they change their courses, our clients, off the back of that. And we also measure NPS score. How happy were they during the course, after the course, a year after the course, 2 years after the course, with the support that you've given them. Also boosting Ofsted inspections readiness, I'll talk about, but I just wanted to go through one thing around revenue. This will be different for different providers, but I'll give an example from some colleges we work with. How could destinations tracking actually impact our revenue directly? So for AB destinations, we started tracking milestones, milestone 3 for skills bootcamps and outcome proofs for AB contracts. Most providers need to get 50% outcome proofs to renew their AB contracts, and that is all that our clients have been bothered about. But when we ask, what is your destination? What impact have we had on you? What are the outcomes? We also say, right at the end, would you be interested in another short course with us? I think we had 150 for Newham College, and for Middlesbrough we got 200. And so, it's up to them to kind of convert those leads. But if you're asking the destination, you could also ask if they want reskilling, as lifelong learning is a long-term thing now, and automation happens and people are going to need to reskill more and more. That's going to become more important. Just wanted to highlight, been looking through the Ofsted inspection reports from a lot of training providers and colleges recently, and over the last 6 months to a year, the word outcomes has just increasingly appeared in a lot of different places. And the amount of funding you get from courses based on that learner getting an outcome has increased, and I see it likely to increase more. Skills Bootcamps is a good example. 30% of the funding is based on that, you getting proof that that person has got an outcome or a job. So that's just quite an important area to think about. The education inspection framework relating to Ofsted has actually changed. I've got a guide from Pearson there, you can have a little read, but it's changed recently. There were 4 key measures, but they've changed. So teaching, learning, and assessment effectiveness and outcomes, they're combining to focus on quality of education. So this is how you'll be inspected in the future in terms of those headings. Think about destinations in terms of helping you write a self-assessment report for when Ofsted do come in, and also quality improvement plans as well per curriculum area. So Generation Alpha, probably a couple of years extra away for university, or it is, but this is anybody, if you don't know, it's anybody born after 2010. So basically most of them are 13 years old or under, or 13 and a half and under. That means that in a year and a half, they're going to be marketed to by all your competitors. And thinking about, what that means is quite important. World's population is getting slightly bigger, even though there's kind of more complex arguments around that, around falling birth rates, but there are more people. There will be fewer 16 to 19-year-olds in the UK after 2030, but that demographic is bulging at the moment. A lot of providers we've talked to have got 10, 20, 25% extra students this year. ABs, the adults, at the moment it's decreasing, but from 2030 that market is going to be increasing. So even though it's a slightly smaller market, it is increasing, and it's getting a big focus from national government. It's getting a big focus from national government because of the amount of automation. So there's going to be 30% of the jobs, 30% of jobs that are around today are going to be obsolete by 2030. And so they'll be needing new courses, new curriculum to train people, and that's what the government understands. So there's going to be a focus on that. There is one report called the McCrindle report by Mark McCrindle. So I'll send this PowerPoint out and people can just look at it. But there's a lot of insight and data around Generation Alpha. Give you a little bit of an insight. Generation Z before Generation Alpha, Generation B will be after. This is quite a good table, and this is in the report as to what they like in terms of what they are looking for in terms of educational outcomes, in terms of technology. How do they look at technology? How do they interact with technology? Thinking about it from a marketing perspective, there were a lot of companies five years ago that were created. There's one called Unibuddy in the HE space. They connect learners that are applicants with learners that are already at the university through a kind of chatbot system. And that's a peer-to-peer approach. They like talking to peers, and that works quite well. Generation Alpha like talking to influencers, and how many training providers, colleges, unis use influencers to connect to, use Spotify, use YouTube influencers and advertise on there. Not many that I've seen. Artificial intelligence will be used by Gen Beta, is also going to be used by Generation Alpha. And it's not just about them using AI to absorb, your ads or absorb content through things like ChatGPT, but it's also going to be about how you use AI to market to learners. So just a very simple kind of overview there. I mean, ChatGPT, which I think most people will get their heads around by now, which we have in one of our systems, our careers system. It's already got an app store. So the app store is just like the iPhone app store that, when it came about initially, people didn't know what it was, but it is obviously massive now. It's huge, and very likely the ChatGPT app store will get very big as well, and there'll be advertising opportunities through those kind of systems. So it's worth having a think about how you're connecting with this group in terms of some of their behaviors. There's a big trend around mental health. They're very, very digitally addicted to multiple different devices. And if you know anybody who's 13 and a half or under, probably got their head stuck in an iPad or a phone, unless 90% of the time, unless you're very lucky, or you live in a cave. But part of this and part of social media has caused a massive increase in mental health issues. And sometimes thinking about that when you're thinking about marketing to students is quite important. From the report, it said that in the last 5 years, almost half of the parents that they surveyed, 48%, have increased their expectations of their child's first school in terms of supporting well-being. And this is a huge market now. But one good example is, hey, I'm trying to get a destination and I'm ringing them on the phone, and they won't pick up because they're under 19, because they don't want to pick up, and it's a different ball game. So that's a bit of insight into Generation Alpha. So I'll move on to traditional data collection methods. What I would probably start by saying here is there is no one perfect communications tool. And unless you get the LEO longitudinal educational outcomes data from the government 2 or 5 years lagged, which becomes less and less useful, that is very rich, but you're not going to get every destination. That's pretty simple. There's also no one system or channel that is necessarily going to be perfect. It should really be a multi-channel approach. And things like email, phone, letter, and SMS are not completely ineffective. Usually they're used for different types of learners at different times. We actually saw just as high or even higher engagement from over 50s on WhatsApp than under 50s. We did a pilot with Learning Curve Group, a training provider, to automate 40,000 destinations. But during the pilot, we increased known destinations from 40, I think it was 35% to 83%. But they were 2 courses, taxi driver courses, security guard courses, all over 50s. And short A/B courses change their phone numbers less often. So always get as high or higher engagement with shorter courses. Obviously, things like letters can be used by providers, universities, training providers, colleges, to market, and still are, to market to learners. And they can be great, but they can also be very hard to measure. And they can also be very expensive, more expensive than digital. Messages on WhatsApp, usually negligible to 0.0004p. Text through most company systems, 3-4p. I know one of our colleges, Activate Learning, they spent nearly £1 million on text and didn't need to. So there's another money thing, not a money increasing thing, but a money decreasing thing. So a mix of these would be good. But generally, companies we work with would use 90% of the more modern social media apps. I think what's quite important is that you've got to think about GDPR. So at the moment, through WhatsApp, if you link it through the one-to-many business API, you can be GDPR compliant, and the GDPR is based on your data privacy policy. So whatever that says to the learners, if your learners sign up to your terms and conditions, it probably says you can work with third parties like software suppliers, and that GDPR side of things should be fine. There's also, WhatsApp is based in America, for instance, but there's no issues around that. But you got to think a little bit about GDPR. There's things like Snapchat that younger people like, but there is no business API that's GDPR compliant. So have a little think about that from a legal point of view. This is just a bit of data of the newer social media systems versus the non. Personalization is quite important. We've A/B tested about 200, 300,000 messages over the last 4.5 years. And how you message an apprentice versus an A/B learner versus 16 to 19-year-old versus a student who's graduated from uni is usually slightly different. We saw the highest response rate from adult learners on a Tuesday morning using a combination of WhatsApp and email, and a more personalized formal tone, slightly longer messages. 16 to 19-year-olds on average got back most often at 9:35 on a Friday night when the staff of our clients aren't in. And they like WhatsApp, and they like super, super, super short messages. so short, the fewest letters that you can possibly get. And so that's in terms of time. Tone, they're more professional for more mature learners is what we found. And channels, multi-channels, just test them all, test a few and see how they work for you. One of the biggest problems we've seen is when tracking destinations, it's time consuming and labor intensive. We might have an average client use 2 or 3 people for a month or two to get the destinations of everybody from that last year. And they might be doing that for a third or a half of their day. So it's quite costly in terms of staff time and effort as well. And somebody mentioned this earlier, but difficulties tracking student destinations over time. It's always going to be tougher to get a response from somebody 5 years down the line, but it is possible. It's called sustained destination. So a sustained destination for a full years long course is 6 months. And it also refers to sustained destinations longer than 6 months. So a year, 2 years, 3 years. So Access Creative College actually had Ed Sheeran go through some of their courses, and he didn't get famous until 4 years after. And that would have been quite a useful, bit of information, but they would have to track that regularly. Thinking about a solution, trying to think about a digital solution, because you need to set those triggers up. If you've got 50 different curriculum courses and you've got A/B courses and they're all short courses and they run for a week, you're going to have to get a human to figure out when that course finished and then ring them 6 months later from the end date. It's almost impossible, and a lot of providers don't track their short A/B courses because of that. So just a couple of bits of information which I've kind of already gone over. So how to tailor the messaging. You could create a framework for messaging. I'll give you a bit of an example from one of our frameworks. What does that mean? I'll show you in a second. Select a communication channel. I would use a few and test them out. Multi-channel is the best. Choose a communication tone. Just think about different learners and how they might like to be spoken to. We've found that kind of more colloquial, more social tones have worked better than ultra formal. And setting up digital triggers and time to send messages will be quite important. This next slide is just a messaging framework that we've got. This is, bear in mind, a B2B messaging framework. So we have a messaging framework for our whole company, and we have a messaging framework for each product, each one of our 3 products. So if you're thinking about it from a B2C point of view, there's a lot of frameworks online which might be quite useful. And this was really useful for us for getting really clear on how we message which types of groups. So if you do have apprentices, A/B learners, some HE learners, you might want to think a little bit about what is your primary message to them, what problem are you trying to solve for them, track their destination so you can support them with career support or get them into a job. And then what are the sub challenges behind that? They don't have enough career support, or they don't know who to get a job with, or they haven't got any employee contacts, or they need interview experience or coaching or CV writing support. And then what is the benefit of those services that you offer to get over those challenges? And then finally, what specific aspects of your courses or your career support offering or what features of your company or your products are going to help them. So that's just a bit of an example. Just a couple of slides left. How long have we got left, Vanessa?
Just under 20 minutes.
Fine. I think we've probably got about 10 minutes left. So if anybody wants to ask questions at the end, then they can. So just talking about some specific metrics, I think somebody mentioned it a little bit earlier. We used to have quite a few providers that would measure intended destinations. We've had a lot of people say it's been pretty much useless, but I kind of disagree now. So an intended destination is, while the learner is still with you, where are they thinking they want to go out of those 4 main destinations? What we've done, which could be a very good idea for a lot of the providers, is to, whether it's through WhatsApp or face-to-face or whatever, get that intended destination, send either an email or a WhatsApp or any kind of survey out to get that intended destination. We use it to try and warm up those learners, and it makes quite a bit of difference. Where are you thinking of going, Mr. or Mrs. Student? And by the way, we're going to send you a quick message a month or 2 after you leave, and also 6 months and 12 months after you leave. It'd be great if you could answer that very short survey. And that actually helps. So marketing the fact that you will send them messages after they leave has had quite a big significant improvement on the engagement rates. And I know engagement was an issue in the group we were in earlier. Actual destination is a pretty simple one. It's one of those 4 destinations, which is job, unemployed, further level of education, or apprenticeship. Breaking that down per course is quite important. Sustained destination is what I said before. So just to repeat, sustained destination for a full year course, if it's a funded course, is 6 months. So have they been in that outcome, hopefully a job for 6 months? But also it would refer to longer term, so 12 months, 24 months, 36 months. In terms of outcomes, I would say is probably the main thing that the government's looking at in terms of funded education providers, because they're spending a certain amount of money on these learners, and they want to know if their money has been effective. So we ask questions through our surveys and we design them with clients, but things like which things have going on this course helped you with in your outcome or your job? Press 1 for increased salary, press 2 for getting a promotion, press 3 for it's helped my well-being, it's improved my life. The Learning Curve group specifically actually added it's improved my life to one of their campaigns. So they could say 92% of people on their academies courses said that their courses improved their life. That's quite good for an Ofsted inspection. It's quite good generally. So the outcome side is very important. One thing I'd say there is, can you prove, and people ask this question a lot, can you prove whether you've had an impact on a learner if they leave your course, if they leave it early? And the question is, yes, possibly. So imagine somebody was on a 3-year engineering apprenticeship and they left within the first 6 months, and they went to get a job in something completely different that was, supposedly unrelated, maybe in a marketing role. But in the apprenticeship course, they did modules around communication and presentation. Could you say that those skills helped that learner in that new job that was unrelated to the actual apprenticeship they did? The answer is potentially yes. So an outcome doesn't have to be if somebody's completed a course. It can be proving whether the soft skills they learned during that course could be used in another, maybe unrelated destination. I know that I spoke to Mark David, who's in charge of the LSIP, the Local Skills Improvement Plan for the North East. He works for the North East Automotive Alliance, I think, and they do a lot of work with Nissan. And Nissan have just rang them up and asked for 50 students that have technical skills. So you could learn anything from engineering courses or digital courses that might actually go towards having an impact on a student getting that job. So outcomes is the focus at the moment. Curriculum breakdown is really important. I think, Alex, you said it earlier. You need a certain level of confidence statistically in the amount of data you have, and some providers don't have it. That gets even harder when you break it down per curriculum. Sometimes it's very difficult, and the ones where you get least engagement are sometimes the courses which have least participation or highest dropout. So it's not always possible to get significant data for every one of your courses, but if you can increase the number of courses that you get significant destinations data for, that's really useful. We've just got feedback over the last 4 or 5 months from clients. That is a key thing. So we're trying to create a new dashboard around break it down per curriculum area, because everybody that we speak to says, okay, especially if you're a training provider or college, how do I know that my curriculum is relevant for the local provision? And it's feedback from the learners, which you need, but also statistically significant data per curriculum area. And one big question we're trying to help our clients solve is, now you've got the data, how are you changing your your company for the better? And one of the things is changing curriculum or curricula. That can mean a number of different things. It could mean getting new staff in if you get really bad feedback on the tutor. It could be changing the course if it doesn't quite hit the note. It could be doing more in-person practical workshops with learners rather than standard written courses. So there's so many different things that you can get feedback on, and if you can just evidence that you have done changes based on the data you've got, that's the link. That's the link that Ofsted are looking for, basically. So benchmarking data, it'd be useful to figure out, everybody's got very similar problems, or most companies have got very similar problems, especially with tracking destinations data. Would it be good to figure out whether you were better or worse than the average? I think that's what a lot of our clients seem to care about. So have a little think about that as well. Okie dokie. So looking at the data and how you can actually leverage it for improvement. One area is collating course feedback and adjusting your curriculum accordingly. So as training providers, most training providers probably are actively seeking feedback from learners to ensure that your programs stay relevant and effective. One of our clients, actually, after receiving feedback that their digital course lacked practical exercises, actually revamped their whole curriculum to include hands-on projects. And they also split up some of their courses from fully face-to-face to partly face-to-face and partly online. So one of the actions you could do around curriculum would be creating a feedback mechanism. So surveys or focus groups with learners to gather input from learners on a regular basis and use that feedback to make informed decisions to adjust the curriculum. And that's one of the areas most of our clients have given us feedback on is the biggest area they'd like to improve on. One area would be improving student support and career services. Career services can be very highly linked to destinations. And one problem I alluded to earlier is that most providers don't have enough budget to get hundreds and hundreds of humans as careers advisors supporting students. And even if they did, still quite hard to engage the students. So important to target resources to students who need them the most. We've helped clients triage learners who do need that help the most. A lot of the time for funded learning providers, it's been NEETs, people who are in, not in education or employment or training. Very important area for us at the moment, careers. There's obviously different measures of good quality career support. There's the Gatsby benchmarks, but it was a very common framework, very popular, very good, but there are limitations as well. I know, for instance, the area of the West Midlands that got the worst outcomes was Wolverhampton, but they had the best adherence to the Gatsby benchmarks, not necessarily meaning that they'll get improved outcomes. There's also the matrix inspections and certifications as QCS. I guess the question there is what really is impact around the careers side of things. If you can prove that somebody has a positive outcome and has it for a long time, then that is almost certainly impact, as long as it's related to the course that you taught them. So that's really where the government's going. And careers is highly focused on and highly linked to that. In terms of enhancing student experience, personalizing learning is becoming more and more important, and some of the larger universities are getting quite sophisticated at it with quite expensive CRM systems. Some of the smaller providers don't always have that capability, but personalizing the learning experiences based on the student data should eventually give the learners a better experience. So just understanding that each student has unique learning needs. We leverage data analytics with our clients to personalize their learning experience. So give you an example, you can use your MIS system. In the FE sector, there's Pro Solutions or Tribal, and in the HE space, they use Tribal as well. In training provider markets, usually BUD systems or PICS, especially for apprentices. But you can set up different pathways for different learners. So one action might be to figure out the bottlenecks in your journey. Think about different stages of the learner journey. We've done this in past webinars, but usually it's something like inquiry to application, application to enrollment, enrollment to course completion, which might be a short course or a full year course or multi-year course, and then to employment and destination, and then to sustained employment, a destination. So where are you strong or weak in those areas? Where are the dropout areas? What's the data telling you? Why are people dropping out? We've got an enrollment system we use for quite a lot of our clients, and one thing we do is send a message around why they dropped out, if they did drop out and don't come to that college again. And that information of people dropping out can actually be really useful. So if you can figure out better learner engagement, then you can get all of that information and use it to improve the your whole strategy. Ofsted readiness, this is only relevant to funded learning providers, so sorry Alex, not necessarily for the university in most areas. It would be relevant for apprentices or skills boot camps if you're a university. But showcasing data-driven decision making is quite important for Ofsted and showing how you're actually helping the student be successful. So can you exhibit a constant readiness for Ofsted inspections? Can you track how many of your learners get great jobs or get jobs, full stop? Can you show the impact of your courses and how are you doing that? And even when somebody doesn't get a course that's related, a job related to the course that they learn with you, could you still highlight impact? Could you still evidence it? And what other impact could you show, and how potentially how this feedback that you get from learners could help you win more contracts? It could help differentiate you from the pack. So one action there might be to develop a comprehensive data dashboard or a report that highlights key performance indicators and outcomes to showcase to Ofsted inspectors when they do come in, and also to show your board and other stakeholders. Further Education are doing this at the moment. Last year and a bit, they've created something called the FE dashboard, which is going to link in some live data from the government. I know one of the new measures in there is employability. We actually think that employability is quite hard to measure because the jobs are changing every year. So how can you measure employability when the jobs are changing every year and the people are changing every year? But creating your own data dashboard of impact data that maybe you don't have, that might set you aside from the pack. And just the last two, attracting and retaining students. So use past success stories for marketing material, put them on your website, videos, use cases of specific students that have done really well. Sell your courses to past students more effectively by doing this. We had Middlesbrough College get an extra 200 leads from asking, whether learners were interested in another course after the destination survey. Another action there might be to develop marketing materials. So things such as alumni profiles or success stories or videos, things that highlight positive outcomes and career pathways available to students who enroll in any of your courses. And the last thing is curriculum innovations. So this is, I think, changing curriculum is one of the core reasons for getting your destinations data or getting confidence that your current curriculum is correct. So blue ocean thinking, I don't know if anybody's heard about that, but it was actually a phrase linked to startups. How do startups end up staying in a blue ocean rather than a red ocean? A red ocean is where sharks kill each other and competition kill each other and you never get anywhere. A blue ocean is you're swimming in your own market. So if you get off the train station in Birmingham Centre, you can walk through the city centre and there's about 1,000 different training providers, universities, mainly because there's a big market there, a lot of people. But if you can market yourself differently, even if you're selling the same courses, can you market them in a different way? So that's blue ocean thinking. There's a very famous book that's useful there. The CEO of Activate Learning is one of our advisors, and she used to constantly run design thinking sessions. There's 6 specific sections of design thinking, but that is a specific innovation framework for thinking differently, and it's used often to create new curricula. And then you can just look at the labour market data, which is, there is some okay stuff online for free, but really you might have to put your hand in your pocket for slightly better information. So Lightcast, which is a combination of Burning Glass and another company, they merged recently. It's probably one of the largest, most famous. And there's also a company called Fathom, and Fathom was bought by Pearson recently. This is a huge AI database, which is actually predicting what jobs there will be in the next 3 to 5 years. And they've got some free online resources as well. So you can go and have a little look at that.